Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. Today I have Christine O'Brien Horstman with me. Christine is a life coach, an author, a corporate trainer, a mother, and a chronic illness warrior. That's a lot. You have a lot. With everything Christine has been through and continues to have to deal with, she definitely knows how hard it can be to take care of yourself and your family when life gets tough. Christine wrote a book called Deal With It, Doll: Coaching Yourself Through Crisis. It was published in January of 2020, and it was inspired by the pandemic and some of the lessons learned from her own health journey. Thank you, Christine, for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And congratulations on getting your book published.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure that's a pretty big deal.
It was exciting. It was a goal. Yeah.
So one of the central talking points of my podcast and sort of what led me here is that, life is messy and there's these ups and downs and, we're sort of on this roller coaster that we can't control, sort of,
right.
And we have to roll with it, right? And I think everybody I talk to sort of feels that same thing and they recognize that that's the path. And I think you also are going to affirm that's your story as well. So I typically like to set us up with letting you give a little bit of your background and how it led you to this spot where you're writing a book about these kind of things and you're coaching and sort of transitioning into that side of your role versus your corporate training. So tell me a little bit about the journey and maybe we can share that with the audience to get us started.
Sure. So my background is as a sales manager is how I originally started out. I was managing a regional office. I became general manager as my teams grew and my experience grew. And then I'd always done the hiring for the office that I ran. And unfortunately, some of the firing, when we had to fire, I had to deal with that. So a lot of HR tasks fell on my shoulders as a sales manager managing that office. Then I became general manager. I did additional hiring for the company as they expanded into new offices and a lot of new manager development. So I created a training for new managers. So that's where I got my start into really, the seeds of what I do today. I continued as a general manager for a couple different types of organizations, but always in a regional office or a small company. So I was always wearing these multiple hats. And, contrary to what the whole world tries to tell you, if you go into coaching, niche, 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 you have to niche, niche, niche. My strength lies in being a generalist. That general management background gives me a lot of practical, applicable, different kinds of scenarios. And that's what also enables me to do a lot of the corporate training and touch on a lot of different topics, pretty much all soft skills, but also the HR issues. So preventing harassment, behavioral interviewing, all those other kinds of pieces. And for me, again, when I do the coaching, that's a blessing because working with corporate clients and that different mindset, and then working with people one-on-one, each feeds the other. And I think each slightly different skills, but obviously a lot of mixed crossover. And I think it makes me stronger in each, to be honest. And when I wrote the book, it allowed me to tell my story in a different way. So I've really always led my coaching with career coaching. I do end up doing life coaching as well. But it usually starts as someone who's coming for, I need a different job. And then we back into the bigger issues in their life or longer term goals. And so I do tend to lead with the career coaching, even though I do life coaching. So more of my stuff is in that professional realm. But again, what I think makes me good as a coach is what I've learned through my chronic illness and as a mother of a child who's had his own struggles about resilience, about coping, about reinventing yourself. Because when people come to coaching, there's often this sort of feeling of, I feel a little stuck. I feel a little overwhelmed. My confidence is down. And what happened to me was this light bulb. And I guess it was always flickering and I kind of knew it. But with the pandemic, the light bulb was shining bright on job loss and chronic illness. Both share this loss of identity. And who am I when my label changes, right? And I think women in particular go through this on a deeper level than most men that I know go through this. There's still a greater burden, with taking care of family, as a caretaker for children or parents, and more on and off ramping in our careers. And how do I do both and satisfy all parts of me? And so this conversations that I was having around a lot of job loss that happened early on in the pandemic, unfortunately was good for business as a career coach. I actually got a lot of new clients in that time period, but I found myself sharing the things I learned, the lessons I learned through chronic illness. And so that was really where the seeds of this book came about. So one half is about the personal transitions and parts of our life. One half is about the professional transitions and parts of our life that we go through in any given year or sometimes happen to us unexpectedly.
And what are you finding as common themes? So you obviously wrote about your experiences, and now that you're talking to people more specifically about those same types of experiences that they're having, are you seeing any common themes around what people go through during that transitional period and when they kind of wake up to the need to have that transition?
Yeah, I think there's just that feeling of resistance, right? And that can show up in different ways. But, in work, we talk about it as burnout. At home, we don't quite have that same word. Maybe we say stress, or I feel stuck, I feel flat, I don't feel like myself. Phrases like that, whereas we have sort of that burnout phrase that we think about when it comes to our professional side, where things don't feel good anymore. We don't have the same energy or desire or passion for things. I think that is often one of the signs. Usually when people come to coaching, they've tried to do it themselves and they're just not getting the results that they need. And of course, my book is called, the subtitle is Coaching Yourself Through Crisis. And I think there's a lot of work we can do on our own, but working with someone else tends to get us there a little bit faster.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I've said in a few other podcasts, and not in a disrespectful way, but coaches are everywhere nowadays, right? I didn't even know. You guys can't see her, but she rolled her eyes. But you guys, it's just this fact that there's so many out there. It's sort of this thing that's just blowing up. And I don't say that to say it's a bad thing. I think people are becoming more insightful and tuned into themselves. And I agree with you. I think there's so much work that we can do ourselves. And especially if somebody can't afford it, do the work, because you can still level up so much just by doing the work, by books and YouTube and Insta, whatever, all the things, right? But I do think having a coach takes you to that next level of having some sort of like a friend, not quite a friend, and they'll be honest with you and push you a little bit more, right? So you can build that kind of friendly relationship, but yet it's not somebody that will be afraid to tell you the truth.
Right. Yeah. And I think, a coach will challenge you, help you see things from a new perspective. The secret to coaching is asking questions and knowing the right questions to ask, knowing when to delve a little deeper, back off, right?
Yeah.
And I think it is a support system. Often it's that accountability piece that people find helpful, keeps you on track versus I could put it off because it's just my own deadline, right? Yeah. Versus I got to show up for a meeting and have accomplished some of the things we talked about. So I think the accountability piece is big. And it's, I did probably roll my eyes. I didn't catch that looking at myself, but it's ironic that you bring that up, or timely, because this afternoon I'm doing an Instagram live with a woman who's a therapist about this conversation. She's actually a therapist in England. And this was kind of interesting to me. Therapists aren't regulated, it seems, to the same degree that they are in the United States. So sort of similar issues that there is around coaching of sort of, anyone can say I'm a coach, right? And there's certain freedom to that and sort of, empowering people to own their strengths, and create a business. But there's a danger in that too, right? And it is a little hard. I go on social media and literally it's like every single person on Instagram is a coach of something now, right? And some of them are just come to that through their own experience. But what I've also found just through following some people is some of those people are amazing. And some of them don't understand the difference between coaching and consulting and training. And there are differences, right? A coach doesn't tell you, do it this way.
Yeah.
A coach leads you to what's inside yourself, of what you know that helps you step into those strengths to reach those goals. But I'm not prescribing you got to do it exactly like this, right? And so I think that's where you can start to see the difference on, especially in places like social media, of someone calling themselves a coach that's not actually trained as a coach.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a lot of training too, but I think that people can go to different places and get certificates or whatever.
Oh, it's all over the map, the different types.
But I think just like any other profession, there's good ones and bad ones. And like you said, you just gotta, you gotta interview, you gotta kind of watch somebody or see what they're like. And then I think you get a feel for it. And so interesting. I sort of derailed because that wasn't where we wanted to go, but I feel like it is a timely, a timely topic, and it just keeps popping up. And I almost feel a little bit like I need to like shrink down when I say, and today I'm with Coach, but because everybody's got that in their title now. But I think people need to look beyond that because to your point, some people are really bringing it to the table, regardless of that's what they're doing now, but it's worth listening to.
Right.
So back to you and your coaching. One of your specialties is around working with people around messaging that they may be hanging on to, right? Like these external factors or our history or whatever that kind of guides us to where we end up. And so can you talk to me a little bit about what that looks like, what you see out there and how you help people with working through that?
I think that often what we're doing is retraining, unlearning, shifting, and reframing. We know what we need to do, but there's some voice inside our head that keeps holding us back or even sabotaging or doesn't really believe we can do it. Some people, this shows up as things like imposter syndrome, which there's, a lot of conversations around, but it can be a lot of different things. And one of the things I talk about in the book is this idea of who are you? What's essential to you? What are your values? What are your strengths? How do you define success? Because often we're led on a path of life of achievement and accomplishment. And now I love school, so I don't kind of like we're saying about coaches, I don't want to diss teachers or the education system, but it trains us in this, I progress linearly. I check off certain accomplishments, skills, I move to the next level. My goal is to graduate, and then I go to college, and then I get a job, and then I get married, and then, right? And the sort of the train going down the tracks, and all of a sudden people are like, what destination was I going to? I don't even like riding by train,
Yes.
And so at some point, people have that moment where they feel that. Sometimes it comes through natural transitions like graduation, or now I have a child, or my child's graduating. Sometimes it's through these natural stages and transitions we go through. And sometimes it's through a full-blown crisis. My husband wants a divorce. I lost my job. I have cancer, right? And then that causes us to slow down, have to reassess. And sometimes that's often the deepest opportunities of transformation. So many people we all probably even know in our own individual lives, let alone people we admire from afar, that's where deep growth and change really took place. And so in this process, though, I think what a lot of people find is there's old messaging that may have even helped them at one point, but doesn't fit anymore. Or it's messaging they never thought about and have absorbed. It's a voice in their head that sounds like theirs, but it's actually someone else's. It's that teacher who told them, you'll never be a good writer. You can't even pass 8th grade English, and they want to write novels or, whatever the case is, right? And so reworking those thoughts takes going a little deeper, getting really honest and vulnerable about what that is and how it's serving you or not serving you at this point. And how do we retrain ourselves? And so that is why in each chapter, I have these mantras or positive affirmations. It's a good tool to help us reframe, kind of give us that rewiring and give us short-term bursts of confidence, discipline, and ignite that desire to what we want to be now.
I'm fascinated by this whole topic because I feel like many of us don't even know that those messages happened or exist, right? And in talking with somebody else, we were talking about the example of, I don't know, I think it was the parent told the kid as a child, well, you can't sing. Like, you're not a good singer.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, of course, right? And the parent, the mom, whatever, was just being a mom. Like, it wasn't like a big thing, a big moment, a big pivotal thing. But that child could then, and this was a fake story, but that child could then take that and create a story around it in their own head.
Yes.
That then propels them into this, I should never pick up a microphone. I should never sing at a birthday party. I should never, whatever, right? Because they can't sing. Their parents said they can't sing.
Right.
And it's not true. It's just these stories we attach to these messages that we got. And we don't even realize we did it or we got them. It's fascinating to me.
Right. And that person may have had their own wounds, their own fears, their own jealousies. Who knows, right? Like, we don't even know they may have said it so off the cuff, they never even remember they said it, right?
Yeah.
But it sticks with someone else, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of us have a lot of negative self-talk. You're so stupid. I can't believe you just messed up that presentation. I'm so mortified. I feel like an idiot. You are an idiot, right? We do a lot of negative self-talk.
Yes.
Oh, that's tacky. Who's going to put themselves out on social media? Different ways that we talk to ourselves that isn't very nice, right? Worse than we probably talk to other people.
Yes. Yeah, nothing that we would ever say. I mean, we would just never, ever say those to other people, to our kids, to our loved ones, whatever, but we say it to ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's just, the brain is wild. The more I talk to people, our brains are so wild and so capable too, which is very cool.
Yeah, it's like this most powerful muscle, right? But like all muscles, we have to sort of exercise it and feed it the right things. And now just using mantras or positive affirmations isn't going to necessarily get you out of every crisis, right? I don't want to ever tip into sort of this toxic positivity. You can coach yourself out of every crisis, just say a few positive things and, you're all set. Because I don't think that's realistic or necessarily healthy and set someone else up for other feelings of failure. Yeah. But it's a tool. And that's really the lesson I learned through chronic illness, but lots of them. But one of the big ones is that you need a toolbox and you have to kind of keep building your toolbox. And sometimes you have to dig back into that old thing that's underneath and kind of rusty and pull out that old tool. And sometimes it takes combining 6 tools to get the job done. And so it's a tool. It's one more tool.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I mean, it takes a lot of tools to build something, right? Mm-hmm. So you need a lot of different tools depending on the situation and the job. And I would just add to what you said, sometimes you got to dig in deep or below to get to the whatever's under the surface. But you also every now and then need to clean out that toolbox because, to your point before, sometimes we leave these thoughts, these tools, these patterns, these things, these relationships, all these things that we are not serving us well anymore, but we somehow hang on to them and we need to learn to shed them, right?
That has been very hard for me. I get very attached in all ways. So that's been a journey for me. And I feel like I had a big shift with turning 50 with some things that I realized, more relationships of this isn't serving me well. And it doesn't mean I don't love them or love what we had, but right now, is this serving my best self? And so, I think that cleaning out is another important piece to that, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we go back to the same tool, right? And I talk about that a lot, whether I guess I think actually you mentioned it in the book, but whether coaching or training is that the strength over relied upon can tip into a weakness, right? And so that's that same thing where this tool helped me, so I'll always go back to that tool or this way of coping. And that isn't always the case.
Well, that's just like doing life habitually without really waking up, right? We follow the same patterns, do the same habits, and we don't even pay attention to what we're doing. They're just happening. So similarly, that tool or that relationship or whatever thing we're really talking about, it's what's comfortable to us. So we go to it because it's easy and it's there versus looking somewhere else for something that maybe is a little bit more work, a little bit more challenging, a little bit out of our comfort zone, but would be more suitable. Yeah. It's interesting. So talk to me a little bit about expectations around what we think things should be like versus, right? I know this is something that you talk about. And for me, I feel like this is such a good one because I think it fits in with our expectations around, what our kids should be like, what our relationships should be like, what our job should be like. And I think that sometimes we get so hung up on what it should be that we miss out on what it is. And I've talked about that a little bit, especially around my kids who are very, very different. But I think you have this picture in your mind of how things are going to go and how they're going to grow up and what's going to kind of that path going to be and who they're going to become. And at some point when that doesn't fall into place, you get a little bit, I don't know, resistant, I guess, right? And you can miss out on all the goodness that's right there. So talk to me about a little bit about that work.
Yeah. And I think even sometimes there's a sadness, right? Or anger because it didn't turn out the way you wanted and it didn't meet expectations. Or you're sad because you so badly in your mind wanted and expected one thing and got the other, right? So I think it can come out as a variety of emotions. I think this is one of the reasons why the holidays are hard for people, because I think it's one of those where there's this mountain of expectation of what it's supposed to be like and how we're supposed to interact and how we're supposed to feel. And then we almost set ourselves up for failure, right? And that staying really honoring the present of what it is. Yeah. And I think this is where the self-awareness piece is so important of the self-work that you talked about and finding tools, whether that's reading, journaling, watching YouTube, listening to a podcast, or working with a professional, is just ways to increase that self-awareness, which again requires some honesty with yourself and some vulnerability and some willingness to try and change and do things differently. And again, I think that expectations, when we start to take that step back, we realize not all of those expectations were self-created, right? They are often an amalgamation of our upbringing, cultural messaging, what we think we're supposed to. And so I think often when we do the hard work and we take a step back of why are we so disappointed? Why are we so angry? Why are we so upset? Why do we feel so out of control? And we realize, well, is it that important to me that my child becomes a doctor, or whatever it is that we're holding on to? But we do have often, I think this does show up in the parent-child relationship a lot. And I think that's the area in particular that I wrote about it, but just that expectation of what should be versus what is, right, and who we want them to be or think they should be, and what a successful, happy life would look like for them. And a lot of that's our own hopes and dreams mixed in there, our own past experience that we're either successful and happy or unsuccessful and unhappy. And it might not be full-blown vicariously living through your child, but there might be a little bit more of that wishing and wanting to see something happen through them than we realize. And again, thinking, if they don't, I'm judged as a failure as a parent. What if my kid doesn't want to go to college, right? Oh my gosh, what will everyone think? And I just paid for this prep school or, whatever the case may be, right? So fear of judgment is often a big one. And so there's some common, I'm not a psychologist, but there are some common psychological fears: fear of judgment, fear of not being liked, fear of lack of achievement. So when you kind of peel back, usually it comes down to one of those pieces or a mixture, a little bit of each sometimes.
When you were talking and you said the holidays, something jumped into my head that I had never thought about, but I do this. Well, I used to do this. Maybe I still do it a little tiny bit, but around vacations, right? We plan these big vacations and we have all these expectations. This is going to be like perfect. And we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we're going to see this and that. Everybody's going to be joyous the whole entire time. And reality is like, you can't take, 15 people on a vacation and everybody not want to kill each other by the time.
Yes, right. And there's so many other pieces that go into it. How we like to live, our habits, when we go to sleep, right? That happened to me with my sister and our dear friend, and we're all super close. But it was the first vacation we were going to take together with the kids, and the kids were little. And, we tried carefully to pick the house. But again, you don't really know what you're getting. The way it was set up didn't work the way we needed to. We had a baby on one schedule, this kiddo on that, people who like to sit all day at the beach, others who want to go and do. And honestly, it was not fun. We had some moments, but overall it was sort of terrible.
Yeah, right.
And my girlfriend and I, we still can barely talk about it. We were a joke about like, we're both just horrified, but we went into it with these high excitement and expectations. But the real thing with expectations, where we really have the problem, is communication, because we don't actually express the expectation clearly. We think other people have the same one because it makes sense to us, or we think we've sort of said it, but we haven't said it fully, completely, directly, honestly. And sometimes we haven't been honest with ourselves of just what we're putting on it.
I love that. Yes. And you also said something about, which really resonated with me, about really stepping back and saying, this is important to me, right? So like just staying on the beach all day, or, getting up and out of the house by 9 o'clock versus 10 o'clock, whatever the silly, story is. It's probably not that important, but you get hung up on the what I thought it would be, right? When it really didn't matter. Like I lost 2 hours, or we went to the beach on Tuesday instead of Thursday. Thursday we went to the park, whatever the situation.
Right.
Right. But
we've come in with this like set of rules that make sense to us. And that is one of the reasons why I love using DISC and that as a personality assessment, because compared to other personality assessments, and of course I'm a coach, I love them all, but DISC is my tool that I use all the time because it has a better component for communication, in my opinion, and understanding kind of the way we're wired and the way someone else is, and why we sometimes have these clashes, and where what feels right to us we're forgetting is just because that's our personality style, that's our upbringing, that's our habits versus somebody else's.
We bring a lot to the table for sure, right? Sometimes we don't even realize all of what we bring to the table with us. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go back to the book for a minute. So I have two questions. The first one is about the cover of your book. And so this is a podcast, so we'll be audio, but I will put a picture of it out there so people can see, and of course the links. And the cover, for you guys that are listening, it's like this, I would say 1960s-ish woman, and she's dressed as like this very, I would say, a working woman. And I don't mean career working. I mean like roll up your sleeves, Mr. Clean, I'm going to scrub the floors woman. And she has like her arm up to make a muscle. And it made me chuckle because I thought it was such a good representation of, I'm this strong, get it done kind of girl who can just get in there and do what I have to do. And I'm not sure if that was the intent or if you picked the cover, and I'm interested in the story on that.
Yeah, so it was process between the designer, my publisher, and myself. And it was a little challenging at first because I wasn't feeling it. It's not that the first designs weren't beautiful or awesome designs. It just didn't feel right. And then the first iteration of this, she had dark hair. The colors were completely different. Her eyebrows were really dark and strong. Lips were a little different. Those kinds of things. So it sounds small, but when you start to do the small tweaks, it does change the feel. So I had strong feelings on the colors. And I really did, though, when she did that first iteration, it spoke to me because it's got that Rosie the Riveter vibe, right? And I liked that. I liked where she was going with that. So we just changed up the colors and we softened her face. And I was like, I'm blonde, or at least I pay a lot of money to be blonde. And so let's just switch it up a little bit. But I did love, I'm so glad you described it the way that you did, because it's that energy of, I've got this, I can do this, right? I can get dirty if I have to, but I'm also kind of cute, and I can roll up my sleeves when the going gets tough. That saying, the tough get going, right? And that's one thing when I've done different readings that I tend to end my readings with, that life's tough, but we're tougher. Everybody gets theirs. Doesn't feel fair in the moment. Oftentimes we feel very, very alone. Oftentimes we feel like we're the only one, although it's very common to feel that way, and it's very real, and it's pretty powerful, and it can even be debilitating, but it's not very often we're the only ones who've gone through something, right? But everybody gets theirs in life. And if you haven't, I'm sorry to tell you, it's around the corner because no one gets out without some getting a little beat up and some bruises and some scars. But again, we have this one precious life So even when circumstances are difficult, how do we live it in a way that feels authentic of who we are at our core and enables us to make the most of the situation?
I love that. My second question was going to be to wrap us up and ask us if there was any final words you wanted to leave with our audience before that, we cut that you hadn't gotten to before. And I don't think you could do a better job than what you just did. So I'm going to leave it at that because I think it's really great advice, and I couldn't agree more. It's the essence of what this show is about, that we all have these peaks and valleys and ups and downs, and it's going to get dark, but it's going to get light again. So you have to just hang on and wait for that sunshine to come out, because it does come every day, right? Even if it's behind the clouds, it comes. That sun rises every single day that we're alive. So I think you just gotta wait and wade through it. So thank you for that. That was fantastic. I will put all your links and ways to connect with you on the show notes. Is there any preference or the place that you're most active that you want to call out?
Absolutely.
Or are you kind of across all of them?
I think Instagram's a good place. And on my bio link in Instagram's a link to kind of everything else. LinkedIn, I'm not quite as active as I used to be, but for those who are, in the more professional bent and maybe aren't on other social media channels, link in with me because I'm put my career coach hat on, expand your network, always be networking. So LinkedIn and Instagram are great.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I think this was really fun, and I encourage everybody to go grab the book. It's Deal With It, Doll, and I think it's going to be a great read for everybody. So everybody should go grab a copy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.